I'm Leo, I'm 32 now, and I watched my own father try to sell a lie about me to a multimillionaire CEO, only to have it blow up in his face with a single Google search. Before I tell you about the silence that fell over that dinner table, a silence so heavy it felt like you could break a tooth on it, let me know where you're all watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far a story can travel. Alright, picture this. A high-end steakhouse. The kind of place with dark wood, leather chairs that sigh when you sit in them, and lighting so dim you can barely read the ridiculously overpriced menu. It was my father's 60th birthday party. He'd rented a private room. The guest of honor, besides my dad, was a man named Mr. Harrison. My dad always called him Harrison, as if they were old golf buddies, but everyone knew the score. Mr. Harrison was a real estate titan, a genuine shot caller in our city. My dad, Richard Vance, was just one of his many associates, always orbiting his son, hoping to catch some light. My mother, Martha, was fluttering around, making sure everyone's wine glass was full. My younger brother, Kyle, the golden child, was holding court at his end of the table, telling some story that had his friends roaring with laughter. And then there was me, Leo, the quiet one, the one who just manages apartments. I was seated, unfortunately, right between my father and Mr. Harrison. For most of the dinner, I'd managed to stay invisible. I'd mastered the art of it over the years. I just nodded, smiled, and focused on my steak. But then my dad, flushed with expensive wine and the proximity to power, made his move. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Harrison," he said, his voice a little too loud. "You've met my boy Kyle, of course. He's killing it in marketing. But this is my other one, Leo, the steady one." Mr. Harrison turned to me, a polite, practiced smile on his face. "Leo, good to meet you. What is it you do?" Before I could answer, my dad jumped in. "Oh, Leo's in real estate, too. In a way. He's a property manager. Keeps the buildings running. Good, solid work. He's a hard worker, this one." The tone. If you've ever been the other child, you know that tone. It's the one that sounds like praise but feels like a pat on the head for a well-behaved dog. It's the sound of low expectations being met. Mr. Harrison nodded, still looking at me. "Property management is a tough business. Teaches you the fundamentals." I just smiled. It has its moments. And then my dad sealed his own fate. He puffed out his chest and said the words that would hang in the air like a guillotine. "Yeah, he's thinking about maybe getting a promotion at his firm one day. Moving up the ladder. Baby steps, you know?" Mr. Harrison held my gaze for a second longer. A flicker of something, curiosity maybe, passed through his eyes. He pulled out his phone. It was a subtle, almost dismissive gesture. He murmured, "Vance? What was the name again?" "Leo," my dad supplied eagerly. "Leo Vance." And as my father beamed, oblivious, Mr. Harrison, the CEO with his quiet, understated power, typed my name into the search bar. I watched the screen's light reflect in his glasses. I saw his thumb scroll once, then twice. Then he stopped. His eyebrows lifted just a fraction. His polite smile vanished, replaced by a look of genuine, unadulterated surprise. He looked up from his phone, not at my father, but directly at me. The whole table seemed to fall silent. To understand that silence, to really feel the weight of it, we have to go back 3 years. We have to go back to a Sunday dinner that changed my life forever. 3 years earlier, the setting wasn't a fancy steakhouse. It was my parents' familiar dining room, the one that hadn't changed since I was a kid. Same heavy oak table, same slightly faded floral wallpaper, same smell of pot roast and quiet disappointment. It was a standard Sunday dinner. My mom, Martha, was fussing over the gravy. My dad, Richard, was carving the roast with surgical precision. And my brother, Kyle, was glowing. He always seemed to glow, as if he had his own personal lighting crew following him around. At 24, he was 2 years younger than me, but he already had the confidence of a man who'd never known a single day of doubt. Mostly because he hadn't. My parents had made sure of that. We were halfway through the meal when my dad cleared his throat, a signal that an announcement was coming. He and my mom exchanged a look, a little secretive smile that I knew always excluded me. "Well, son," my dad began, beaming at Kyle. "Your mother and I have been talking. You've been working hard." I almost choked on my mashed potatoes. Kyle had been working hard at his new marketing job for all of 6 months. After being let go from his previous 2 jobs for what he called creative differences, and what his bosses called not showing up. "And we know you've been looking at houses," my dad continued. "So, we decided we want to help you get started on the right foot." My mom reached over and handed Kyle a crisp, blue envelope. Kyle opened it, and his eyes went wide. He pulled out a check. Even from across the table, I could see the zeros. $10,000? Kyle breathed, a dramatic catch in his voice. "You guys, you didn't have to do this." "Of course we did," my mom cooed. "We want to see you settled. A homeowner. It's a big step. This will really help with the down payment," Dad said, puffing out his chest. "It's what families do. We support each other's ambitions." They all looked so happy. Perfect little family portrait. My dad, the proud patriarch. My mom, the nurturing matriarch. And Kyle, the golden son, receiving his inheritance, his birthright, a little early. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to just stay quiet, to finish my meal and disappear. But then, a stupid, hopeful part of me spoke up. "Wow, that's great, Kyle. Congratulations." I forced a smile. "Actually, I've been thinking about buying a place myself, too." The silence that followed was different from the one at the steakhouse. This one was heavy and awkward. My dad was the first to break it. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a short, sharp, dismissive bark. "Come on, Leo," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Let's be realistic. That's a bit over your head, don't you think?" "Why?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. "Well, for one, the money," he said, gesturing vaguely with his fork. "You manage apartments, you don't own them. It's a different league. Your salary. It's fine for what it is, but a mortgage is a serious commitment." My mom jumped in with her signature brand of gentle condescension. "We just want what's best for you, sweetie. Maybe you could try renting a nicer apartment first? Something with a balcony? Baby steps. Baby steps." I was 26 years old. I had a degree. I had a full-time job with responsibilities. I managed a 200-unit building, dealing with budgets, contractors, and tenants' problems at 3 a.m. But in their eyes, I was still a child who needed to take baby steps. "I've been saving," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I have a plan." My dad just shook his head, a pitying look on his face. "A plan is one thing, Leo. The real world is another. Don't get your hopes up just to be disappointed." He then turned back to Kyle, the real conversation. "So, this house you're looking at in the suburbs, does it have a 2-car garage?" And just like that, I was invisible again. I sat there, finishing my pot roast, the knot in my stomach now a solid block of ice. They weren't trying to be cruel. That was the worst part. In their minds, they were just being practical. They had already written my story for me. Leo, the reliable, forgettable son who would live a small, simple life. They just didn't think I was capable of more. That night, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just smiled, helped clear the table, and left. They thought they knew my story. Fine. I would just have to write a new one without them in it. I didn't go home and rage. I didn't punch a pillow or drive aimlessly. I drove back to my small, meticulously clean 1-bedroom apartment. One of the perks of being a building manager, and I did what I always do when I feel overwhelmed. I made a list. But this time, the list was already made. I sat down at my cheap particle board desk, turned on my second-hand laptop, and opened a folder on my desktop simply labeled, "The Project." Inside wasn't a dream. It was a battle plan. For the past 6 months, while my family thought I was just doing my 9-to-5 job, I was living a double life. Every night, after I dealt with leaky faucets and noise complaints, I was a student. I devoured every book on real estate investing I could find. I'd taken online courses on property valuation, financing, and landlord-tenant law. I had spreadsheets that would make a CPA weep. I opened one now, titled Finances. There it was in stark black and white. 3 years of living like a monk. No fancy vacations, no new car, no expensive dinners. My salary wasn't huge, but my rent was free, and I was disciplined. I packed my lunch every single day. I learned to cut my own hair from YouTube videos. It all added up. Total savings, $22,481.37. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. Every penny earned, every penny saved. It was the physical proof that my father was wrong. I didn't just have a plan. I had capital. I clicked to another file, a list of properties I'd been watching on the MLS. I wasn't looking at the shiny new houses in the suburbs that Kyle was considering. I was looking at the ugly ducklings, the ones that scared other people away. Foreclosures, estate sales, handyman specials. And there it was, the one I kept coming back to, a duplex in a working-class neighborhood on the edge of town. It was ugly, with faded yellow siding and an overgrown yard. But I had run the numbers a dozen times. Asking price, $89,000. A 20% down payment would be $17,800. I had that. With closing costs, I'd be stretched, but I could do it. I pulled up my mortgage calculation spreadsheet. At a 6.5% interest rate over 30 years, the mortgage, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance would be around $550 a month. Then I opened the third piece of the puzzle, rental comps. The apartments in the duplex were 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. Similar units in the area were renting for $700 a month each. That was $1,400 a month in potential income. $1,400 minus the $550 mortgage left $850 a month. Even after setting aside money for repairs, vacancies, and capital expenditures, I'd be cash flow positive from day one. I wouldn't just own a house. I'd own a small business. The numbers didn't lie. The opportunity was real. The only thing missing was the nerve. The voices of doubt in my head all sounded like my father. It's over your head. Let's be realistic. I picked up my phone and called the one person who knew about the project. My best friend, Chloe. We'd known each other since college, and she was the complete opposite of me. Loud, impulsive, and brutally honest. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me you didn't just sit there and take it. I didn't have to explain. She already knew. I sat there and took it, I admitted. Leo, for the love of God. I could hear her pacing. You have to stop letting them do this to you. I know. But Chloe, I think I'm ready. I took a deep breath. The duplex, the yellow one. I'm going to make an offer. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice came back, all the joking gone, replaced by a firm, serious tone. Okay, good. You've done the work. You've run the numbers. You know more about this than anyone. She paused again. Stop auditioning for people who never bought a ticket to your show, Leo. Make the damn offer. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? I looked at my spreadsheets, at the years of quiet, patient work. I thought about my father's dismissive laugh, my mother's pitying smile. She was right. The risk wasn't in making the offer. The real risk was doing nothing, and letting their version of my life become the only one. I'm doing it, I said, my voice steady. Tomorrow. The next morning I felt like a spy. I called in sick to my property management job for the first time in 3 years. My boss was so surprised he asked if I needed him to call a doctor. No, just a bug. I lied, feeling a pang of guilt. The truth was, I felt more alive than I had in years. I had already been pre-approved for a loan, a process I had done in secret weeks before. Now it was time to meet my agent. I had chosen Brenda, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in investment properties. I met her at a coffee shop far from my side of town. So, the duplex on Elm Street, she said, getting straight to business after I'd laid out my numbers. It's been on the market for a while. The estate that owns it is motivated to sell. What's your opening offer? My father's voice echoed in my head. Don't get your hopes up. The safe move was to lowball them, to haggle. But my research told me something else. The price was already fair, almost a bargain. The estate just wanted it gone. I want to offer full price, I said. Brenda raised an eyebrow. Bold. I like it. But are you sure? We could probably try to knock off a few grand. No, I said, surprised at my own firmness. It's a good deal. I don't want to risk losing it over a couple $1,000s. Let's offer the asking price, but with a condition for inspection. Brenda grinned. You've done your homework, kid. I'll write it up. The next 3 weeks were a special kind of torture. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. The estate had to get the sale approved by a judge, a process that was slow and full of bureaucratic red tape. During that time, I had to go on living my normal life. I went to work. I fixed clogged drains. I even had another Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Feeling better, Leo? My mom asked. Much better, thanks, I said. Kyle was talking about the bidding war he was in for a 4-bedroom colonial. He was complaining about having to get a lawyer to look over the paperwork. He was acting like a seasoned player in a game he'd just been handed the cheat codes for. I just nodded along, a quiet smile on my face. My secret was a warm, protective coat in that cold dining room. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, Brenda called. They accepted, she said simply, and the appraisal just came in. You're not going to believe this. What? I asked, my hand gripping the phone. It appraised for $91,000. You've got $2,000 in equity before you even sign the papers. Congratulations, Leo. You got a hell of a deal. I hung up the phone and just stood there in the middle of my small apartment, the silence buzzing in my ears. I did it. It was real. The closing was a month later. It was an anticlimax, really. Just me, Brenda, and a mountain of paperwork in a sterile office with a bored-looking title agent named Margaret. I signed my name over and over again until my hand cramped. Then Margaret slid a set of 2 keys across the table. Congratulations, Mr. Vance, she said, without looking up. You're a homeowner. I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun, the keys feeling heavy and real in my pocket. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Kyle. I just called Chloe. She didn't say congratulations. She just screamed, a long, joyful noise that made me laugh until my sides hurt. We have to celebrate, she yelled. Not yet, I said. First, I have to go meet my tenant. That's what I did. I drove straight to the duplex on Elm Street. It looked even uglier in person, but it was my ugly duplex. I knocked on the door of the occupied unit. A woman with tired eyes and graying hair, probably in her late 60s, opened the door a crack. Can I help you? She asked, her voice wary. Hi, I'm Leo Vance, I said, extending a hand. I'm the new owner. She looked at my hand, then back at my face. She didn't smile. Great, another slumlord. My heart sank. No, ma'am, I said quickly. I'm not. I live just across town. I promise things are going to be different. I pointed to the dripping gutter hanging off the roof. Starting with that, I'll be here Saturday to fix it. She just grunted and closed the door. It wasn't the welcome I had hoped for, but as I stood on my own front porch, looking at my own broken gutter on my own ugly duplex, I didn't feel discouraged. I felt a sense of purpose. This was it. This was the start. That Saturday, I was at the duplex at 7 a.m. with a new ladder, a toolbox I'd spent my last few $100s on, and a dozen YouTube tutorials loaded on my phone. The woman with the tired eyes, whose name I learned was Mrs. Diaz, watched me from her window as I wrestled the ladder into place. I could feel her skepticism from across the lawn. The gutter was just the beginning. The previous owner, an out-of-state corporation, had let the place fall into disrepair. In the vacant unit, the one I planned to rent out, the carpet was stained and reeked of stale cigarettes. The kitchen faucet had a persistent drip, and a whole section of drywall in the bathroom was soft from a leak. For the next 2 months, that duplex became my life. I'd work my 9-to-5 job as a property manager, then drive straight to Elm Street and work until I was too exhausted to see straight. I became a self-taught expert in everything. I learned how to patch drywall, how to replace a faucet, how to lay vinyl plank flooring. My knuckles were perpetually scraped, my back always ached, and I had paint in my hair more often than not. One sweltering Saturday afternoon, I was on my hands and knees in the vacant unit, wrestling with a toilet I was trying to replace. I was covered in sweat, grime, and something I prayed was just rusty water. I heard a soft knock on the open door. It was Mrs. Diaz. She was holding a tall glass of lemonade, condensation dripping down the side. "You look like you could use this," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it before. I sat back on my heels, wiping my forehead with the back of a dirty hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Diaz. You're a lifesaver." She watched me for a moment, taking in the chaos of my amateur renovation. "The last guy," she said, "the one from the company. He'd just send some kid over who would slap some paint on the water stains and call it fixed. Never fixed the actual leak." "That's not the right way to do it," I said, taking a long drink of the lemonade. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. "No, it's not," she agreed. She looked at the new flooring stacked in the corner, the fresh paint on the walls. "You work hard." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an observation, and coming from her, it meant more than any praise my family could have given me. "I'm trying," I said. From that day on, things changed. Mrs. Diaz started leaving a cold drink for me on the porch when she saw my car. She'd offer me a plate of the tamales she was making. She told me her name was Maria. She told me about her grandkids, and she started telling her friends about the nice young man who had bought the building. By the time I was ready to rent the second unit, I didn't even need to post an ad. Maria's friend, a quiet man named Frank who worked at the nearby auto plant, was waiting to move in. I was officially a landlord, a real one. I had 2 tenants who paid their rent on time, a property that was slowly increasing in value, and a positive cash flow of nearly $900 a month after all my expenses. I took that money and I didn't spend a dime of it. It went directly into a new, high-yield savings account I opened. I nicknamed it the Roof Fund, because I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the first roof. I was going to buy more. My world had split in two. There was the Leo my family saw, the quiet, unambitious son who managed apartments. And then there was the real me, the one who spent his weekends covered in drywall dust, building a future one broken-down duplex at a time. And for now, I was happy to keep those two worlds completely separate. About 6 months after I bought my duplex, I got the inevitable gold-embossed invitation in the mail. "You are joyfully invited to celebrate the new home of Kyle Vance." Of course, Kyle had finally won his bidding war. My parents had, I was sure, contributed more than just the down payment to secure the victory. A housewarming party was scheduled. Attendance was not optional. I walked into a house that was the physical embodiment of my brother's personality. Big, loud, and designed to impress. It was a 4-bedroom colonial in a new development where all the houses looked identical, just with different colored shutters. The lawn was an unnaturally vibrant green, and there was a brand new SUV in the 2-car garage. The house was packed with my parents' friends and Kyle's gaggle of bros from his marketing job. Music was playing just a little too loud. People were drinking champagne from plastic flutes. My mom found me instantly, pulling me into a hug that smelled of hairspray and pride. "Leo, isn't it wonderful? Our Kyle, a homeowner." She gestured around the open-concept living room, with its cathedral ceilings and giant flat-screen TV. "He has such good taste." My dad was holding court by the massive, granite-topped kitchen island, a glass of scotch in his hand. He was telling a story to a rapt audience that included my Uncle Bob and a few of his neighbors. And I told him, my dad was saying, "Kyle, you can't cheap out on the kitchen. The kitchen is the heart of the home. You get the best appliances, the best countertops. It's an investment in your future." Kyle, standing nearby, just grinned and soaked it all in. I felt like I was in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. They were all celebrating this symbol of success, this house bought with my parents' money and a salary that I knew for a fact was propped up by a mountain of credit card debt. Meanwhile, my quiet success, My ugly little duplex that was actually making money was a secret no one here would ever understand or appreciate. My dad spotted me and beckoned me over. "Leo, get in here. Have some champagne." He clapped me on the back, a little too hard. "See this, son? This is what it's all about. Putting down roots. Making something of yourself." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, I've been thinking. You've been at that property management job for a few years now. It's time you started thinking about a real career. You're not getting any younger. Don't wait too long to grow up." He said it with a smile, as if he were giving me the wisest advice in the world. He had no idea I was already a business owner. He had no idea my net worth was probably higher than my brother's, who was currently showing off his new refrigerator that could dispense 4 different kinds of ice. An old anger, hot and sharp, flared in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show him my bank account, my rent roll, the pictures of the floors I had installed with my own 2 hands. But what would have been the point? They wouldn't have seen it as a success. They would have seen it as a risk, as a strange and slightly embarrassing hobby. They would have criticized the neighborhood, the age of the building, the fact that I had to fix the toilets myself. They would have found a way to diminish it, to make it small, because my success didn't fit their narrative. So I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I swallowed the anger. I let it turn back into that cold, hard resolve. I looked my father in the eye. I smiled a genuine, calm smile. "You're right, Dad," I said. "I'll think about it." I raised my plastic flute. "Congratulations to Kyle. The house is beautiful." And as I walked away to get a drink I didn't want, I made a new promise to myself. I wouldn't just buy one more property. I was going to build an empire. A quiet, invisible empire that they would never see coming. The next year was a blur of calculated, relentless work. The Leo my family knew continued his routine. He showed up for Sunday dinners, brought a bottle of wine, and listened patiently to Kyle's stories about his promotion, his new car, and his plans to build a deck. He was predictable. He was stable. He was boring. The real Leo, however, was a ghost. He was up at 5 a.m., scanning listings before work. He spent his lunch breaks on the phone with contractors and his evenings driving through neighborhoods, looking for sale by owner signs. The roof fund was growing steadily. The cash flow from the duplex was automatic, a quiet, reassuring hum in the background of my life. After a year, I had nearly $15,000 saved up again. It was time for property number 2. That's when the universe decided to throw me a curveball. I was scrolling through my email one night when a name popped up that made my stomach clench. Amanda Bennett. Amanda had been Chloe's girlfriend in college. Their breakup had been the stuff of legends. Dramatic, messy, and the reason Chloe still refused to go to certain coffee shops. Amanda had always been ruthlessly ambitious. I remembered her telling Chloe once that she needed a partner who was going places. A comment that had infuriated me at the time. Now here she was in my inbox. The email was a generic marketing blast from a real estate firm I didn't recognize. Amanda was an agent now, apparently. The subject line read, "Hot investment opportunities for savvy buyers." Ordinarily, I would have deleted it. But morbid curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It was a list of distressed properties. And the third one on the list made my heart stop. It was another duplex, smaller this time, on a street called Maple Avenue. It was a bank-owned foreclosure. The price was almost comically low, $72,000. The pictures were terrible. The lawn was a jungle, and there was a board over one of the windows. But the location was good, close to a bus line and a small community college. The numbers started spinning in my head before I could stop them. I called Chloe. "You are not going to believe who just emailed me." When I said Amanda's name, she groaned. "Oh no, what does she want? Did she find your secret millionaire blog?" I laughed. "She's a real estate agent now. And Chloe. She might have accidentally sent me the deal of a lifetime." "Ugh, of course she did," Chloe grumbled. "Failing upwards. It's her specialty." She paused. "Is it a good deal, though? For real?" "It could be," I said, my voice getting excited. "The price is insane. If the bones are good, This could be a home run. Then you call her, Chloe said, her voice firm. You call her, you get the house, and you use the profit to build a giant golden statue of you telling her to get lost. It'll be poetic justice. It was weird, setting up a showing with my best friend's infamous ex-girlfriend. But Amanda was all business. She met me at the property, her heels sinking into the muddy lawn. She barely seemed to remember who I was. The place was rough. It smelled like dust and decay. But the foundation was solid, the roof was newer, and the layout was good. The bank just wanted it off their books. They weren't interested in haggling. I told Amanda I'd take it. Financing it was a masterclass in creative and slightly terrifying financial maneuvering. I didn't have enough cash for a 20% down payment this time. So I went to my local bank, the one where I had a history. I showed them my perfect payment history on the first duplex. I showed them my rent rolls. I showed them my spreadsheets. I convinced them to give me a cash-out refinance on my first property. Its value had already gone up, thanks to the cosmetic fixes and the reliable tenants. I pulled out $20,000 in equity. It was the scariest check I had ever held in my hand. That, combined with my roof fund, was enough. I bought my second property with cash flow from my first. I was leveraging. I was a real investor. The work started all over again. More dust, more paint, more scraped knuckles. But this time it was different. I was faster, more confident. I knew what I was doing. 6 weeks later, both units were rented to students from the community college. My monthly positive cash flow tripled. The empire was growing. And still nobody knew. With 2 properties humming along, a dangerous feeling started to creep in. Confidence. I was getting good at this. I had a system. I had a formula. And that's when I made my first big mistake. I got comfortable. I started to trust someone. His name was Derek. He was a guy from one of the online real estate seminars I'd taken. We were in a private group chat for alumni of the course, and he was always the most vocal, the most enthusiastic. He lived in the same city, and we met for coffee a couple of times. He was sharp and he seemed hungry just like me. He told me he was struggling to find his first deal, and I felt a pang of sympathy. I had been there. It's all about finding the off-market stuff. I told him one afternoon, feeling expansive and a little bit like a mentor. The real deals aren't on the MLS. You have to build a network. How? He asked, leaning forward eagerly. I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. I hesitated. I had spent months cultivating a relationship with Brenda, my agent. I had also made connections with a few local contractors, a friendly loan officer, even a bird-dog. An old retired guy who would drive around looking for distressed properties for a small finder's fee. This was my secret sauce. But Derek seemed so genuine. You have to talk to people, I said. And then I did something stupid. I gave him a specific tip. Look, there's a rumor that an old apartment building near the University Trail is going to be sold. The owner is getting old, wants to retire. It's a 4-unit building, a quad. Could be a cash cow, but it needs a ton of work. The owner's name is Mr. Gable. I was thinking about the property for myself, but it was a bigger project than I had ever tackled. It would require a commercial loan and a serious renovation budget. It was my next-level target. Sharing it felt low risk. It was just a rumor. Derek's eyes lit up. Wow, man, thanks. That's a huge tip. We finished our coffee, and I left feeling good. I had helped someone. I was paying it forward. A week later, I called Brenda. Hey, have you heard anything more about that Gable property on the trail? There was a pause. The quad? Oh, honey, that ship has sailed. What do you mean? My stomach went cold. Some young go-getter swooped in last week, she said. Went straight to old man Gable, made him an all-cash offer, sight unseen. Word is, he's working for Mark Peterson. Mark Peterson. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Mark was a well-known local investor, but not in a good way. He was a shark, a flipper who bought properties, did the cheapest possible cosmetic fixes, and then jacked up the rents, pushing out long-time residents. He was everything I didn't want to be. I had even competed with him and lost on a property a few months back. He was my direct competitor, my rival. The kid who made the offer, Brenda continued. My source says his name was Derek something. The world went quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face. He hadn't been struggling. He had been playing me. He wasn't looking for his first deal. He was a scout for the enemy. I had gift-wrapped my next big move and handed it to my biggest competitor. I felt naive. I felt stupid. I felt angry. The old Leo would have retreated, licked his wounds, and chalked it up to a painful lesson. But this was the new Leo, the Leo who had rebuilt 2 duplexes with his own hands. I hung up the phone with Brenda and sat in silence for 10 minutes. I didn't panic. I strategized. Derek and Mark had the inside track, but they didn't have the deal yet. It was just an offer. I thought about Mr. Gable, an old man who wanted to retire. What would an old man want more than just cash? He'd want a clean break. He'd want to know his legacy, the building he'd owned for 40 years, was in good hands. I did something Mark Peterson would never do. I did my homework. I found out Mr. Gable's wife had passed away a few years ago. I found out he had a dog, a scruffy terrier named Gus. I found out he ate breakfast at the same diner every single morning. The next day, I didn't call him. I didn't send a lawyer. I went to the diner. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. I waited. When Mr. Gable walked in, I walked up to him. Mr. Gable? I said. My name is Leo Vance. I'm a local property owner. I know you're a busy man, but I would be honored if you'd let me buy you breakfast. And I'd love to tell you why I think I'm the right person to buy your building. He looked at me surprised, and then he nodded. We sat in a booth for 2 hours. I didn't just talk numbers. I talked about my philosophy. I told him about Mrs. Diaz and Frank. I told him I did the repairs myself. I told him I wanted to fix up the building, not just flip it. I wanted to create good homes for people. That afternoon, I had my lawyer draft an offer. It wasn't all cash, but it was higher than Mark's offer, and it included a clause allowing Mr. Gable to stay in his own apartment, rent-free, for a year while he figured out his next move. 2 days later, Mr. Gable called me himself. The deal is yours, son, he said. The other guy, his lawyer, was a real shark. I didn't like him. I like you. I had won. I had been betrayed. I had been outmaneuvered. And I had fought back not with money, but with integrity. It was a victory that tasted sweeter than any of the others. And it taught me the most valuable lesson of all. In the world of real estate, you're either the shark, or you're the one who knows how to swim with them without getting bitten. The next family gathering was Thanksgiving, a few months after I had closed on the quad. The renovations were already underway, a massive project that was eating up all my time and money. I was stressed, exhausted, but also exhilarated. I now owned a total of 8 units. My part-time hobby was quickly turning into a full-time obsession. My dad had, as usual, invited some of his business contacts. This time it was the big one, Mr. Harrison, the CEO. He was there with his wife, and his presence cast a formal, slightly tense energy over the usual family chaos. I was trying to stay out of the way, making small talk with my Aunt Carol, when my dad cornered me with Mr. Harrison in tow. The dreaded introduction. Harrison, you know my son Kyle, my dad said, gesturing to where my brother was loudly explaining the stock market to our cousin. And this is Leo. Mr. Harrison shook my hand. His grip was firm, his eyes analytical. Richards told me you're in property management, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, I said. I manage a building downtown. We stood in that awkward silence that happens when adults have nothing to say to each other. My dad, desperate to impress, tried to fill it. The market's crazy right now, isn't it, Harrison? Kyle was just saying the residential market is overheating. Mr. Harrison gave a non-committal shrug. Residential is emotional. I prefer commercial. And then, without thinking, I spoke. The words just came out, a product of the hundreds of hours of research I'd been doing. It's not just commercial. The real opportunity right now is in multifamily units in B and C-class neighborhoods. The big investors are ignoring them, but the demand for affordable rentals is skyrocketing. There's a gap in the market. The words hung in the air. Mr. Harrison turned his full attention to me for the first time. He studied my face. A gap in the market, he repeated slowly. That's a very specific analysis for a property manager. I felt a flush of panic. I had said too much. I saw my dad looking at me, a strange expression on his face. It was confusion, mixed with a hint of suspicion. He had never heard me talk like that. I just shrugged, trying to look casual. I just read a lot, I mumbled. Mr. Harrison held my gaze for a second longer, then gave a slight nod. Interesting. He turned away to talk to my uncle, the moment broken. But something had shifted. My dad was still looking at me, his brow furrowed. It was the first time he had ever looked at me and not seen the simple, predictable son he thought he knew. It was just a crack in the facade. But it was a start. And I knew, with a sudden chill, that the wall I had built between my two worlds was beginning to crumble. The call came on a Monday morning. I was in the middle of negotiating a bulk discount on low-flow toilets, the kind of unglamorous task that had become my daily reality. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Leo Vance?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "Speaking," I said, distracted, still looking at the toilet specs on my computer screen. "My name is Jessica Chen. I'm a business reporter with the Metro Business Journal." I stopped clicking. My full attention snapped to the phone. "Okay. I was given your name by a real estate agent, Brenda Mason," she continued. "She handles a lot of my paper's real estate listings, and she mentioned you. She said, and I quote, 'You should be writing about this kid instead of all the corporate suits.' She told me a little bit about your story, how you've acquired several properties in just a few years, starting with a single duplex." My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was not part of the plan. The plan was to stay invisible, to keep building in the shadows. "I'm not sure I'd call it a story," I said, trying to downplay it. "I've just been lucky." "Brenda doesn't think it's luck," Jessica said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "She thinks it's a great story about entrepreneurship, especially in today's market where everyone thinks you need a huge inheritance or a trust fund to get started. Our readers love stories like that. The underdog, the self-made man. It's the American dream, right? The American dream." It sounded so foreign when she said it. I just thought of it as my secret. "I don't know," I hedged. "I'm a pretty private person." "I understand," she said. "But think about it, Leo. Your story could inspire people, could show them that there's another way, that you don't have to follow the traditional path. We wouldn't have to use the exact addresses or anything that would compromise your tenants. It would be about you, your strategy, your hard work." I told her I would think about it. We hung up, and I immediately called the one person I could trust. Chloe. "Absolutely not," was her first reaction. "No way. Your family will see it. It'll blow up your whole spot. Don't do it." "I know," I said. "That's what my gut is telling me." "Listen to your gut," she said. "Your gut has gotten you this far." But for the next few days, I couldn't shake Jessica's words. Your story could inspire people. And another thought, a more selfish one, began to form. Owning your story. For years, my family had written my story for me. They were the authors of my quiet, unassuming life. This was a chance to finally pick up the pen myself. To tell the story the way it really happened. It was a terrifying thought. And it was also intoxicating. On Friday, I called Jessica Chen back. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll do it." The interview was a week later. Jessica was smart, sharp, and she asked all the right questions. She didn't just ask about the numbers. She asked about the nights I spent patching drywall. She asked about Mrs. Diaz. She asked what drove me. I was careful. I never mentioned my family. I talked about my motivation in broad terms, a desire for independence, for building something of my own. 2 weeks later, Jessica emailed me a link to the article. It was a digital feature on the journal's website. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely click the link. And there it was, a picture of me, standing in front of the newly renovated quad on the trail. I was smiling, a tired but proud smile. And the headline was what took my breath away. How one 29-year-old built a $320,000 real estate portfolio without family money. The phrase, "without family money," felt like a shot fired directly at my parents' dining room table. The article was fair. It was accurate. It made me sound impressive. For a few hours, nothing happened. The world kept spinning. Then, at 3:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "We need to talk." Then another text from my dad. "Call me, now." Then a missed call from Kyle. Then another. And another. My phone started vibrating uncontrollably. A cascade of notifications from family members I hadn't spoken to in months. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The family group chat, which had been dormant for weeks, was exploding with links to the article. The wall I had so carefully built between my two worlds hadn't just crumbled. It had been obliterated by a single, well-written article. The secret was out, and I had a feeling that the fallout was going to be biblical. And that brings us back to the steakhouse, the dim lights, and the heavy, suffocating silence. We're back at that moment. My dad, Richard, frozen with a look of pure, uncomprehending shock. My mother, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide. Kyle, down the table, finally silent, his jaw hanging open. They were all staring at the man at the center of the table, Mr. Harrison. And Mr. Harrison was staring at me. The polite, dismissive mask was gone. He was looking at me with the sharp, appraising gaze of a predator who has just discovered a new, interesting species in his own backyard. He held up his phone, the screen glowing with the article from the Metro Business Journal. "This article," Mr. Harrison said, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor. "It says here you own 8 units. A portfolio worth over $300,000. Is this you, Leo?" I couldn't look at my father. I just met Mr. Harrison's gaze. I gave a single, small nod. "Yes, sir. That's me." A low sound, something between a gasp and a whimper, escaped from my mother. My father finally found his voice. It was a choked, strangled sound. "Harrison, there must be some mistake. Some other Leo Vance. My son. He manages apartments." Mr. Harrison didn't even look at him. He was still focused on me. "The article says you started with a single duplex, bought with your own savings. Talks about your strategy, focusing on multifamily units in overlooked neighborhoods, leveraging your assets to grow. It's smart. It's damn smart." He put his phone down on the table with a soft thud. He leaned forward. The rest of the world, the rest of the table faded away. It was just the two of us. "Richard," Mr. Harrison said, finally turning to my stunned father. "You told me your son manages apartments. This young man doesn't just manage them. He owns them. He's not an employee, Richard. He's an investor. He's one of us. One of us." The 3 most powerful words I had ever heard. My father looked like he had been slapped. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a storm of confusion, betrayal, and a dawning, horrified respect. But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. This wasn't just a correction. It was a coronation. "Leo," he said, his voice now booming with energy. "My company is breaking ground on a new mixed-use development project next year. We're including a block of residential multifamily units, specifically for long-term rentals. It's a new area for us. I need a partner on the residential side. Someone who understands that market from the ground up. Someone hungry, who knows how to find value where others don't. I think we need to have a conversation." He extended his hand across the table. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. This wasn't just a compliment. It wasn't just validation. It was an offer. Career-making, life-changing offer. It was a promotion not from my boss, but from the king of the entire industry in our city. My hand felt numb as I reached out and shook his. His grip was like steel. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice hoarse. He smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. "Good. My office will call you tomorrow." He then sat back, picked up his wine glass, and took a sip, as if he hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of our family dinner. The conversation at the table did not resume. Couldn't. The world had been irrevocably altered. I finally risked a glance at my family. My mother was openly crying, silent tears streaming down her face. Kyle looked pale like he was going to be sick. And my father, he was just staring at me. The condescension was gone. The pity was gone. The arrogant pride was gone. All that was left was a raw, bewildered look that said, clear as day, "Who are you?" It was a good question. And for the first time in my life, I knew the answer. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own story. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. If you're here, do me a favor and hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It helps more people find this story, and it honestly lets me know that what I went through means something to someone else. Your support is the biggest reason I can keep sharing the rest of this journey. The drive home from the steakhouse was silent. My parents had insisted I ride with them. I think they were afraid I would vanish into the night, a newly discovered, mythical creature they had only just glimpsed. We sat in my father's oversized sedan, the smell of leather and my mother's perfume filling the space where words should have been. We walked into their house, the same house where my ambition had been so casually dismissed years ago. We stood awkwardly in the living room. My dad paced. My mom wrung her hands. Finally, my dad stopped and faced me. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question was so simple, and the answer was so complex. I took a deep breath. The old Leo would have mumbled an apology, tried to smooth things over. But the old Leo was gone. He had died in that restaurant tonight. "Why would I have told you?" I asked, my voice even and calm. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine question. My father flinched. "Because we're your family." "Exactly," I said. "When Kyle wanted to buy a house, you wrote him a check. When I said I wanted to buy a house, you laughed. You told me to be realistic. You told me to take baby steps. You told me not to get my hopes up." I wasn't shouting. My voice was quiet, but each word landed with the weight of years of resentment. "We didn't know," my mother started, her voice trembling. "We didn't know you were so serious. We thought it was just a dream." "Why was it a dream for me, but a plan for Kyle?" I asked, looking directly at her. He'd been fired from 2 jobs. He had no savings. You didn't see that as a risk. But my dream, my plan, based on my own money that I had saved, that was unrealistic. She had no answer. She just looked down at her hands. Kyle, who had followed us from the restaurant in his own car, was standing in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "I was the one you were supposed to worry about," I continued, the words pouring out now. "The steady one. The one who would get a safe job and never make any waves. You put me in a box, a comfortable, predictable box. And the moment I tried to step out of it, you told me to get back in. We were just trying to protect you," my dad burst out. "The world is a tough place. We didn't want to see you fail." "You didn't want to see me fail?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "No, you just didn't expect me to succeed. You never, for 1 second, believed that I could do something you couldn't imagine for me." I walked over to the fireplace where the family photos were lined up. There were dozens of Kyle. Kyle at his graduation, Kyle on the football team, Kyle with his first car. There were only a few of me, mostly from when I was a small child. Every success Kyle had, no matter how small, was a cause for a parade. Every success I had, you didn't even notice. Do you even remember my final college project? I designed a sustainable housing model that won a university-wide award. They stared at me blankly. Of course they didn't remember. "I worked on it for a year," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I poured everything into it. At the awards ceremony, I called you. And you told me you couldn't come because you had to help Kyle move a new couch into his apartment." My mother's face crumpled. The memory, once buried, was now unearthed. "Oh, Leo, it's okay," I said, and I meant it. The anger was finally burning out, leaving a strange, calm clarity. Because it taught me a valuable lesson. If I wanted to get anything done, I had to do it alone. If I wanted to succeed, I had to do it in secret. You didn't force me to do this behind your back. Your expectations did. I turned to Kyle. He wouldn't meet my eye. It's not your fault, I told him, and he finally looked up, surprised. You just played the part you were given. I'm just sorry it took me so long to realize I could write my own. The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the sound of a family recalibrating, of an entire power structure that had existed for decades suddenly turned upside down. The golden child was in debt, and the forgotten son was about to have lunch with a CEO. The world no longer made sense. The next morning, my father called. His voice was different, subdued, humble. It was a tone I had never heard from him before. Your mother and I were talking, he said, all night. We've made a lot of mistakes, Leo. Okay, I said, waiting. This business you've built, he continued, stumbling over the words. It's incredible. We're so proud. We just didn't show it right. Here it comes, I thought. So, we want to be a part of it, he said, the old take-charge Richard Vance finally reappearing. We want to help. Your mother and I, we have some money set aside in stocks. We could liquidate some of it. We could invest in your company. Be silent partners. We want to help you grow. It was the ultimate olive branch. An admission of my success so complete that they now wanted to buy a piece of it. A few years ago, a few weeks ago even, this offer would have been everything I ever wanted. It was validation. It was acceptance. It was a check just like the one they gave Kyle. But I wasn't the same person anymore. Dad, I said, and my voice was gentle but firm. I appreciate the offer. I really do. It means a lot. I let the sentence hang in the air. But no, I said. He was so surprised he was silent. This is mine, I explained. I built it. Every floorboard, every contract, every late night. It was me. I did it on my own. And I need to keep doing it on my own. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I knew I was hurting him. But this was a boundary I had to draw, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. This isn't about the money, Dad, I said. It never was. This is about proving to myself that I could do it. If I take your money now, it'll never really feel like mine again. I heard him sigh, a long, weary sound. But it wasn't an angry sound. It was a sound of defeat, of understanding. Okay, Leo, he said quietly. I understand. We hung up, and I knew in that moment that our relationship had finally, truly begun to change. I wasn't just their son anymore. I was my own man. The 6 months that followed were strange. My lunch with Mr. Harrison turned into 2 lunches, and then a series of meetings with his development team. The partnership he offered was real, and it was spectacular. It was also way over my head, and I knew it. I told him I wasn't ready for a project of that scale, but I would love the opportunity to learn. He respected that. He hired me as a consultant on the project, paying me a salary that was more than my father made in a year, just to give my opinion on the residential designs. My life had become surreal. My relationship with my family, however, was stuck in a weird limbo. We were polite. We were cordial. We had Sunday dinners where we talked about the weather and sports, carefully avoiding the giant, multi-unit elephant in the room. They knew I was successful, but it was an abstract concept, like a story they'd read about someone else. They couldn't see it. They couldn't feel it. Chloe, in her infinite wisdom, was the one who diagnosed the problem. They need to see the receipts, Leo, she said one night. Right now, you're just a headline in a business journal. You need to make it real for them. Give them a tour. I resisted at first. Felt like gloating. But she was right. They needed to see what I had actually built. So, the following Sunday, instead of meeting at their house, I told them to meet me at a coffee shop. From there, I said we were going on a field trip. They were hesitant, but they agreed. Even Kyle came along, looking awkward and out of place. Our first stop was the first one. The ugly yellow duplex on Elm Street. This is it, I said, parking the car. This is where it started. My mom looked at the humble building, then at the working-class neighborhood around it. I could see the judgment in her eyes. This wasn't the kind of success she understood. But then, as we were standing on the sidewalk, The front door of one of the units opened. It was Mrs. Diaz, Maria. She was carrying a bag of groceries. When she saw me, her face broke into a wide, genuine smile. "Leo," she exclaimed. "I was hoping I'd see you. The faucet in the bathroom is making a little noise. Nothing serious, but I wanted to let you know." "No problem, Maria," I said. "I'll come by and take a look at it tomorrow." "You're a good boy," she said, patting my arm. She then looked at my family, a long, appraising look. "This your family?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "This is my mom, my dad, and my brother." She nodded at them. "He's a good landlord," she said to my mother, her voice firm with conviction. "The best I've ever had. He takes care of this place. He takes care of us." She then said goodbye and went inside. My family was silent. They had just heard a character reference from a source more powerful than any CEO. A happy tenant. We went to the second duplex, the one on Maple. I showed them the new flooring, the fresh paint. I introduced them to one of the student tenants who was just coming home. He called me Mr. Vance and thanked me for fixing the Wi-Fi so quickly. The whole time, my dad was silent, just observing. He was a numbers guy, a businessman, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He was looking at the buildings not as houses but as assets. He was looking at the tenants not as people but as income streams. He was, for the first time, seeing my world through my eyes. Our last stop was the quad near the trail, my biggest project. The renovations were done. It was beautiful. I had restored the original hardwood floors and put in modern kitchens. It was fully rented, and there was a waiting list. But I hadn't brought them there to see the quad. I had brought them to see the unit next to it. My third purchase, the one no one knew about. A small, single-family cottage that I had bought and renovated specifically for short-term rentals. An Airbnb. I unlocked the door and let them in. The cottage was perfect. It was professionally decorated, with a cozy fireplace, a fully stocked kitchen, and a welcome basket on the counter. My mom gasped. My dad walked around, touching the countertops, looking at the quality of the workmanship. It was Kyle who finally said it. He was standing in the middle of the living room, looking around in awe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. He looked at me, his eyes full of a new, startling respect. "It doesn't look like a rental. It looks like a home." And then, I saw a tear roll down my father's cheek. He turned to me, his voice thick with an emotion I had never heard from him before. "I'm so proud of you, Leo," he said, pulling me into a hug that was 30 years overdue. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Standing there, in my own property, surrounded by my shocked and humbled family, I finally felt the one thing I had been chasing all along, peace. The tour changed everything. The abstract concept of my success was now a tangible reality they had walked through and touched. The dynamic in our family was permanently altered. The condescension was gone, replaced by a tentative, almost reverent respect. They started asking for my opinion on things. My dad even called me for advice on his own retirement investments, a reversal of roles so stunning it was almost comical. I was busy. My partnership with Mr. Harrison's company was taking up more and more of my time. My own portfolio was running smoothly. I used the profits from the Airbnb and the consulting gig to buy my fifth property, another small apartment building. My monthly income now far surpassed what I ever could have made in a traditional career. I had finally quit my property management job, a quiet, bittersweet moment.